Welcome to this knowledge clip about the Spectra method. In this clip, I will explain the method, including its history, the principle, an example, and some limitations. In the overview, you can see that the Spectra method was developed quite early and is based on the texture profile method. Let me explain why. In the 1970s, Gail Seville worked at General Foods, the biscuits and cereals company who developed the texture profile method. She became an expert in using the texture profile method, and because it worked so well, she felt that focusing only on texture was actually a big limitation of this method. That is why she decided to develop the Spectra method in the 1970s. The main difference from the texture profile method is that the attributes can be from all sensory modalities, not only related to food texture. Because the Spectra method is based on the texture profile method, the principles are very similar. It is a very elaborate and standardized method with fixed vocabularies and standardized scales using references as anchor points. Panelists do not generate attributes themselves, as they do for QDA, but the attributes to describe the products are fixed and chosen beforehand. This means a high involvement of the panel leader who has a directive role. Because the vocabulary is fixed, intensive training of the panel is necessary. They are trained to use the scales identically in a fixed way. Therefore, standardized references are used that represent specific intensities on the scale. That is why the intensity ratings can be treated as absolute scores, and that intensity ratings are equal across attributes. This means that an intensity of 25 for sweet taste is equal in intensity to a rating of 25 for salty taste. This standardization makes the ratings for products comparable over time, and in theory, this should also make ratings from different studies comparable. I will now give an example to show that results from the Spectra method are even comparable between two different panels with a totally different cultural background. In this study, a comparison was made between two sensory panels, one Dutch and one Malaysian, that were trained using the Spectra method. They evaluated the basic tastes, so sweet, sour, salty, bitter, umami, and fat sensation for 19 different products. What you see here are principal component analyses of the ratings for these basic tastes from both panels. You can see that the lines are almost overlapping completely for all tastes, meaning that the evaluations of both panels are very similar. From this study, it was not only clear that the ratings for the basic tastes were very similar for both panels, but also the overall taste profiles for all 19 products were quite similar. This means that the results of different panels trained with the Spectra method are comparable, regardless of cultural or geographical differences. When implementing the Spectra method, the training of the sensory panel is very time-consuming and could be seen as a limitation. However, it is important that there is enough time to train the panel because they have to be familiar with the use of a fixed spectrum vocabulary. This takes more time than consensus training on their own vocabulary. But if the Spectra method is chosen for sensory evaluation, the panel can really be seen as an instrument, giving reliable ratings on attributes from all sensory modalities. They use a fixed vocabulary with predetermined intensity scales, and therefore the results are comparable over time and even between panels or between cultures.